Greetings, today is Friday, October 3rd, 2025. This is meteorologist Ruben Garcia. In this video, I will be giving an update on a strong tropical wave that is currently emerging from Africa, which is very likely to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm in about 5 to 7 days, toward the eastern Caribbean Sea. And since it is emerging at a fairly low latitude, it is important for us in the eastern and northeastern Caribbean to pay close attention to its evolution, because long-range projections show a potential cyclone approaching the region in about 7 to 8 days. But before giving more details about this forecast, I wanted to mention that we continue monitoring an area of low pressure being tracked by the National Hurricane Center, located just southeast of Florida. If we zoom in on the infrared satellite animation, we can see that over the past 24 hours we have not seen any signs of cyclonic organization. For this reason, the National Hurricane Center, in its latest tropical outlook, keeps the probability of tropical depression development at just 10%. And based on satellite imagery and the latest model projections, the chances of development at this time are nearly zero. Even so, rainfall will affect parts of Florida's east coast this weekend. However, the rainfall totals now anticipated are not as high as what was projected yesterday. The models now show rainfall accumulations between 2 to 4 inches this weekend, specifically for counties along Florida's east coast. Now, let's move on to the tropical Atlantic, where on the visible satellite animation it is evident how healthy the next tropical wave looks as it emerges from Africa. At the moment, it has a low probability of cyclonic development as it moves across the tropical Atlantic. And in fact, this is somewhat unusual, because during October the tropical Atlantic typically sees little cyclonic activity, as illustrated in the following image. In green we see the areas where tropical storms usually form in October. However, occasionally we do see the development of tropical cyclones toward the eastern Caribbean. In fact, if you recall last hurricane season, some cyclones did form in the tropical Atlantic during October, and that is very likely what we will see again in the coming days. The National Hurricane Center has increased the chances of tropical depression development in the tropical Atlantic to 30%. To a large extent, these increased probabilities are due to the warm sea surface temperatures along the wave's path, which range between 28 and 30 degrees Celsius, especially west of longitude 50 degrees west. This means that development chances will increase once the wave crosses west of 50 degrees west. On the other hand, projections from some models, such as the American model, are indicating favorable atmospheric conditions for this tropical wave to develop or strengthen. For example, in the latest run, the American model shows that an anticyclone could be positioned to the east of the Caribbean Sea, which could provide good upper-level ventilation, something that would help the formation of a tropical cyclone if the wave axis is located just beneath this anticyclone. In other words, this means that wind shear will likely not be a major obstacle for the development of this next tropical wave. And that is what we see in the model projections. For example, the ensemble members of the European model all develop a tropical depression or tropical storm. However, since the system is more than 7 days away from approaching the Caribbean, there is still uncertainty about its future track. While some members show a movement across the Lesser Antilles and very close to or over Puerto Rico in about 8 to 9 days, others show a path passing to the northeast of the Caribbean. This uncertainty about its track will continue in the coming days, and we probably won't have a clearer scenario until the beginning of next week. It is worth mentioning that some of these members develop a hurricane in 7 to 9 days as it nears the Caribbean. On the other hand, the ensemble members of the American model all develop a tropical cyclone. And in fact, the next available name on the list is Tropical Storm Jerry. In this case, most of the members show a west-northwest component, taking the future cyclone toward the northeast of the Caribbean in about 8 to 9 days. Meanwhile, the ensemble members of Google's AI model in the Midnight Run also show a west-northwest motion, and most of them maintain that track toward the northeast of the Caribbean. Now, it is very clear that we have different scenarios, and this is largely because it is still too early to determine where exactly the low pressure will form. In fact, a system that takes longer to develop is more likely to travel farther west. However, if it develops faster than anticipated, it may take that more west-northwestward track. The important thing is that residents of the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic must pay very close attention to its evolution, especially given what the latest operational model runs are showing. For example, let's look at the latest run of the American model. Between Wednesday and Thursday, it develops a tropical depression once the wave crosses longitude 50 degrees west, and in about 7 days it shows a weak tropical depression or storm moving over the northern Lesser Antilles, and eventually in about 8 to 9 days it has a tropical storm crossing over the Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico. However, it is important to note that in the midnight and afternoon runs we saw some variations in possible outcomes, and this is totally normal for systems in the development stage. So, I repeat, we still do not know with precision how close or far it might pass from the Caribbean. On the other hand, the European model projection shows a tropical depression forming in about 6 to 7 days east of the Lesser Antilles, with a track crossing over the northern Lesser Antilles and very close to the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico in about 8 to 9 days as a tropical storm. Meanwhile, the European AI model also shows a track across the northeast Caribbean in about 7 to 8 days. The German model develops a tropical depression as early as next Wednesday, when the wave approaches longitude 50 degrees west, while the UK model also develops a tropical depression with a more west-northwest component, passing just northeast of the Caribbean. So, in summary, what can I tell you? There is a high probability that this tropical wave will eventually organize into a tropical depression and potentially into Tropical Storm Jerry, but it seems that the higher chances for development will be once it crosses longitude 50 degrees west. Now then, what will its future track depend on? Mainly on where and how quickly the low pressure develops. As I mentioned, a system that takes longer to organize will be more likely to move into the eastern Caribbean. However, if it develops quickly, it will probably end up taking a more west-northwestward track. So for now, all we can do is watch calmly, and at the moment there is no reason to be alarmed, since the projections will continue changing throughout the weekend, and most likely it won't be until early next week that we can speak with more certainty about whether it will eventually become a threat to the Northeast Caribbean. Therefore, I ask that you continue paying close attention to forecasts from the National Hurricane Center. And if you don't want to miss these analyses, I invite you to give this video a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell so you receive notifications when I post new videos. If there are no significant changes in the projections, it is possible that I will record the next video about this tropical wave tomorrow, Saturday. I hope you all have an excellent weekend. See you later.